it's a great service that he provides by taping speakers and making them available to us so we can carry the message back to people in our home groups and people we know and people we sponsor and people that need to hear these messages. And, I want to encourage you to take time and go out there and look at the CDs that he has. And if you can, get a set and take it back to others that need to hear these. You ready, James? Ready. Okay. All right. My name is Joe Ben Wittenberg. I'm a grateful alcoholic. Sober tonight by the grace of a loving God that I found through the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and have been since June the 26th of 1988. For that, I'm truly grateful. It's really an honor and a privilege to be up here to introduce our speaker tonight. When I first got sober, my sponsor started giving me, it was tapes back then, cassette tapes, of people who spoke in Alcoholics Anonymous conferences and meetings, and I started listening to speakers. And it was through that same medium that I first heard our speaker tonight. And I have never seen Steve talk, but I've heard him talk a number of times. And he's got a great story. He comes from a hotbed of recovery in the Redondo Beach area. We have a lot of common friends, and I know he's a man that's active in AA. He's active in carrying the message. He has a sponsor. He is sponsored. He's a good member of AA. You've got a great story that you're going to hear right now. Here's Steve Lamb from Redondo Beach.
Steve Lamb, alcoholic. It's good to be here. It's good to be sober. I want to thank Joe Ben for inviting me out to share. It's always an honor and a privilege to share. And I want to thank Tricia, my hostess, who picked me up from the airport and then immediately told me, I'm not taking you back. You're on your own. Apparently that's how we do hospitality in Texas, but I'm not judging. I'm just reporting, okay? And I've had a great time at the conference. This is really good. One of the things that I was talking to Joe Ben about is we have the Lawyers Assistance Program also in California, which is the left coast for those of you who are here from Texas. But we have something called the Other Bar. And the Other Bar is the meetings that they have. And one of the things that impresses me about the TLAP program is you seem to have a lot of people that are involved in 12-step programs, and then they come to TLAP. We have a problem in California, at least from my perspective, is that we can't get them out of the Other Bar. We can't get them to assimilate into the other 12-step programs. And that's one of the things that it seems to me that Texas has done, frankly, a lot better than we have out in California. But I'm really glad to be here. My sobriety date is July 27th, 1996. I've been consecutively sober since then, and that was not the plan. It wasn't by design. It's just what happened to me. And before I kind of get into this, I want to get a sense. I know that you're all lawyers, or not all of you, but most of you are lawyers, and most of you are in recovery. But is there anybody in their first year in recovery here? Can I? All right. Welcome. Well, we got a couple. That's good. Congratulations. And you may be sitting there thinking, my God, it's Saturday night in Austin. I know they gave me some kind of steak, but I'm sitting here listening to some bald fat man talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. And it might have crossed your mind. You might be thinking, has it come to this? Yes, it has. Welcome. Welcome. Yeah. And you're probably not all that thrilled about being here. I wasn't for a long time. I was talking to Corey early, and I basically, was born in Bangor, Maine, but I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is hotter than this, not humid, but it's hot. And that's where I grew up, and I went off to college at a place called Claremont Men's College. It's now Claremont McKenna College. And throughout high school and college, I drank a lot. I've always been a drinker. It's a skill set. Not everybody has it. I thought I was really good at it. And I grew up in Las Vegas, and my last name is Lamb, and the sheriff there's name was Ralph Lamb, Sheriff Ralph Lamb. And he was the big kahuna in Clark County. And I would get pulled over all the time, and I would just say, well, man, my uncle's not going to be happy about this. Now, I have no relationship to Sheriff Ralph Lamb, and there's actually a Lamb Boulevard in Las Vegas, but I just milked the hell out of that till I got out of town. And, I got in trouble in college. I got kicked out of college. I got back in college, all related to drinking. And I always knew, not always, but certainly by the time I was in college, I knew that I was unable to control and enjoy my drinking. I knew that I was powerless over alcohol. But I didn't get that second half of the first step. I didn't get that my life is unmanageable. I'm thinking, it's not going that badly. I'm hanging in there. I'm going to school. I'm getting grades. I graduated. At one point in time, I joined ROTC because what had happened was I got drunk with a friend of mine, and we got to thinking about what we were going to do over the summer. And we didn't know what to do over the summer, so we decided to go to basic training. So I went to basic training, and I did well, and they gave me a scholarship. I was kind of poor, so I said, okay, I'll do it. And I went, and I saw this advertisement. They showed this JAG who was getting out of a helicopter with a briefcase, So that's what I thought I would do. I never did that, by the way. I never got out of a helicopter with a briefcase, but I thought that's what I would do. And I had all the plans to do that. I really wasn't that fond of the Army, but that was my plan. They were paying for college. And then I had a little problem. I got drunk one night, and I knew my girlfriend would want to see me. You just have that intuitive sense, when at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning that she misses me deeply, so I went to go see her. And in Claremont, they have these row houses that are very similar. And I was about 3 blocks off, and I went in the wrong house, and the guy was not happy about it. He took a shot at me. He shot when I drink, I like to be cute. I'm not that cute now, but there was a time. You just have to trust me with this. And so I had a flower pot on my head, and I'm dancing and I'm singing because I'm going to see my girlfriend. I'm in the wrong house. He takes a shot at me. He shoots a flower pot off my head. I immediately do my defensive mechanism, which was to wet my pants, okay? Collapse to the floor. They arrest me. And, I don't know what it is in Texas, but in California, that's breaking and entering. It's a felony. Right, and I got charged, and there was a whole bunch of burglaries that were going on. It took them a while to realize that I wasn't doing any of that, but I did a B&E. So I got a felony conviction, but the judge said, look, if you stay out of trouble in the state of California for a year, we'll expunge your record. Now, the Army by then had decided I'm not going to get a deferral to go to law school, so I'm going to be an infantry officer. So I figure, okay, I'll go to Korea, because if I go to Korea, I can't get in trouble for being in California, right? I mean, I'm a thinker, And so, I go through infantry school, I go through airborne school, I go through ranger school, and I go off to Korea. And when I'm in Korea, I did very well in ranger school. I graduated #1 in my class. It wasn't out of any brilliance on my part, I just got lucky. And while I was over in Korea, in the 2nd Infantry Division, there was a guy that came over that wanted to talk to me from Special Forces, from what they call the Green Berets. And he said, look, we think that you should go through selection and assessment. We've looked at your record. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. So when I came back, after a year, I went through Fort Bragg selection and assessment. I went through the qualification course, and I became a Special Forces officer. And I got assigned to 10th Special Forces Group. And I spent a few years there. I went over to Beirut in 1983. I was there during the time that the embassy was bombed, and I left 3 days before the BLT, the Beach Landing Team barracks, got blown up. And all this time, I'm just drinking like crazy. I'm drinking like crazy. By the way, while I was over in Lebanon, because we could not get drug tested when we would go native, they had this stuff that I smoked that apparently was a combination of opium and hashish, which was just spectacular. I mean, it was really spectacular. And I got back, but now I'm just drinking. I'm drinking, and while I was over in Beirut, the general came over and said, what are we going to do with you? You've commanded a team. You're going to have to go on staff. I see you were originally going to go to law school. And I said, yeah, but I had this problem. I had this little felony. I mean, it could have happened to anybody, but, And he said, well, why don't you apply for the funded legal education program, which is an Army program that sends 8 to 10 officers to law school every year, and they pay full ride. So I applied. I didn't think anything about it. I figured they'll never select me. They'll look at my record. And I get deployed again. I'm back in the Middle East. I go down. I'm in Northern Africa, and I get called back to the States. I've gotten picked up for the FLEP program. So the Army sends me to USC, University of Southern California. I go to law school there, drinking the whole time. You know, I mean, people ask me, I'm a relatively active member in Alcoholics Anonymous, and people will ask me about law school, and I'll go like, man, I don't know, I got a diploma, I was there, but I don't, you know, I drank through law school. I mean, after my first year, I compressed my schedule so it was just classes on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then like I'd miss 2 weeks of classes, and I'd think, well, I only missed a couple days. You know, because that's how I rationalized. But I did pretty well, and I graduated from law school, and I went off and I was at 1st Special Operations Command for a while as an international law attorney, and then I went to 82nd Airborne Division, and I was a senior defense counsel. And I tried a bunch of cases, and I'm a trial lawyer by trade. And one of the big cases that I had was in 1989, 1990. We had gone down on Operation Just Cause. We jumped into Panama. And during that time period, there was a gentleman named Roberto Enrique Bryan who killed a Panamanian, and he was charged with a war crime. It was the first war crime trial since the My Lai massacres, and there was a lot of press. It was in the New York Times, and I was the military defense counsel. You know, there was a civilian defense counsel, but I was a military defense counsel. We did that trial, and he was acquitted, and about 2 days after that, I got sent to the Dust Bowl for Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So I was over there during that time period. I got out. I came back, and they sent me to go to the JAG school, which is next to the University of Virginia, to get an LLM. And I'm drinking the whole time. Okay, I got a TSSCI clearance. I want to go back in the field. They send me to the Pentagon. My last duty assignment in the Army, I spent 13 and a half years in the Army. I got out as a major. I was promoted early. And I was the intelligence oversight advisor for the United States Army. Now, that should concern you, okay? My job was to go to special mission units and review them, and I would report to, you hear a lot about the HPSI and the SISI, the House Permanent Select Intelligence Oversight Committee, the Senate Select Intelligence Oversight Committee. I would report to them on what we were ostensibly doing. Okay, that was part of my job. And my office was what's called a SCIF, a Sensitive Compartmented Intelligence Facility. It's basically a safe, you know, that I had a cipher lock on. And one of my jobs was if you got in trouble and you were in a special mission unit, I would take your military jacket, your personnel file, up to the Secretary of the Army and up to the Secretary of Defense and make a recommendation. Should we court-martial this person? Should we chapter him? Should we let him go? What should we do? And it struck me at one point in time, who's going to take my file up? Because I'm drinking all the time. I had something called blanket travel orders. One time I went and I came back, and I'd been traveling for a couple weeks, and you know, I had these vouchers. And when you have blanket travel orders, that means you don't have to get approval before you go. And so this other officer was asking me, he says, well, what were you doing in Panama? And I looked at him and said, well, that's classified. I can't tell you that. And I walked away, and I'm thinking, what the hell was I doing in Panama? We don't have anything in Panama. I mean, clearly I was there for like 3 days. I'm sure I had a good time. You know, and I thought, man, this is, so I resigned my commission. Because I just knew that I was going to get caught. And I went to school, like right now there's a couple 4-star generals. Joe Votel, who's a 4-star general in charge of CENTCOM. Vince Brooks, who's a 4-star general in charge of Korea. I went to school with these guys. I went to the infantry officer basic class with these guys. I mean, I was being groomed. I had potential. You know, I was one of these guys that you know, there's a lot of military lawyers out there, but they don't have background as operationally. You know, I mean, I've got a Ranger tab, I got jump wings, I got a Special Forces tab, I got a Bronze Star, I got a foreign award, I got all the bells and whistles, and I throw it all away because I'm afraid. So I joined an international law firm called Paul Hastings. I'm down in Los Angeles, California, and I'm trying cases. And I don't like to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to give you an idea of what it was like towards the end of my drinking. Okay. Again, I'm a trial lawyer by trade, so I don't know how Joe Ben prepares for trial, but when I was drinking, the way I would prepare for trials, I would get the case files out. And I would put them either in the conference room or on my kitchen table, and I would get out a bunch of beer and some tequila. And, well, the beer is like a basic food group, right? You know, and the tequila is an accelerant. Now, it's very important. You don't need to open the case file, okay? What you do is you start drinking beer and shooting tequila, drinking beer, shooting tequila, And what happens is, in my mind's eye, the courtroom unfolds for me. Yeah, I go in and I pick the perfect jury. I can sense what they're thinking. I pick the right jury. I make an opening statement, and it's just, it's brilliant. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying it's brilliant. And then I'm cross-examining. I'm examining witnesses. All the evidence I want in comes in. The evidence that I'm trying to exclude is out. I make a closing argument, and my God, it choked me up. It was that good, right? And then the jury retires, and they're deliberating, and then after a very brief period of time, because my argument is so brilliant, they come back and they render a verdict or a judgment in my favor. Now, all this happens through the magic of beer and tequila. The problem with this situation, though, it's just a slight problem. The problem is when I drink the way I drink until it's done with me, meaning I pass out. So usually somewhere around the middle of my closing argument or when the jury's retired, lamb goes down, right? So what I have to do is I have to set 3, 4, 5 alarm clocks at 3 to 5 minute intervals all around the room, because 1 or 2 is not going to wake me up. The next morning comes around, and after the 3rd or 4th alarm clock, I get up, I stagger around. I'm not totally wasted, but I'm still inebriated. Okay, I shower, I shave, I put on a suit and tie, and I'm going to court. And this particular morning that I'm thinking about, I'm getting ready for a trial, and the guy that I represent is a guy named Brian. And Brian's a high finance guy out of New York. And this is a case about other people's money. It's a commercial case. We've been trying to resolve it for months. We've had a mediation, we've had settlement conferences, and we're a couple $1 million apart. But we get to court that morning, and Judge Lax, he looks at us and he tells my client and the other client, he says, look, they're going to pick a jury now. But this is just about money. And I know you've had a couple mediations and settlement conferences, and I want you guys, you 2 clients, to keep talking. See if you can resolve this, because you're going to tie my courtroom up for 3, 4, 5, maybe more weeks than that. And, this is just about money. So we're picking a jury, and they're talking settlement, and it's around 11:30, and Brian's really excited. He comes to the judge. He tells me we've got a settlement. It's several $1 million in his favor. He got everything that he wanted. And the judge is pleased. The judge puts it on the record. He dismisses us, and Brian looks at me, and he says, God, this is just great. And it's early, but it seems like we should celebrate. Do you want to have a drink? And I'm thinking, what a country. Yeah, sign me up. I'm ready to go. Let's go, right? So we go to the Grand Avenue Bar, and the Grand Avenue Bar is remarkably on Grand Avenue in Los Angeles. It's right next to the Biltmore Hotel. It's kind of a high-end bar. And I know you guys are all pretty clean, and you probably never did this, but when I drank a lot alone. But when I drank in bars, I like bars that were, they have like a little sawdust on the floor, and I really kind of like that faint O'Day urine scent. I don't know, it just motivated me to drink, right? But this is a really nice mahogany bar, and the bartender's got a suit and a tie on, and he's really classy, and Brian's classy, and I'm thirsty, and I'm in there, and Brian has the bartender take a dusty bottle of cognac from the back of the bar. And he puts it on top of the bar. He takes out 2 large brandy snifters. He plops them down there. And he pours 1 fluid ounce in each one of the brandy snifters. Now, when you put an ounce of tequila in a shot glass, you can see it. It's very clear. It's very apparent. And if you're a good bartender, it's so full, I got to reach over and, because you don't want to spill any of the nectar of the gods, right? But when you put a fluid ounce, even though it's amber, of cognac in a brandy snifter, you see it go in, and you see it kind of shimmer off the side of the glass, but it's sad and lonely and desperate, and and I'm looking over like this, and Brian, he can tell that I'm a little confused. He says, "You've never had cognac before." I'm like, "No, I'm not stupid. He's buying, I'm drinking, but no, I've never had cognac before." Because look, there's a whole process. There's a protocol to this, okay? What you want to do is you want to take that brandy snifter and you want to cup it in the base of the palm of your hand. So the heat from the palm of your hand will go through the brandy snifter. That will warm up the cognac. And then you want to twirl it around and kind of coat the glass. You want to bring it up to your nose. You don't want to snort it. You don't want to sniff it. You just want to allow the bouquet to waft into your nostrils. And I'm thinking, we're going to drink this stuff, right? And he goes, okay, now once you've appreciated the bouquet, you want to back it down, and then you want to bring it up to your lips. You don't want to drink it. You don't want to sip it. You just want to allow the cognac to drape across your palate. And I'm thinking, for God's sakes here, this is not required with, with tequila at all. And by now, you know, I'm a little edgy, right? I'm kind of rocking back and forth. One of my eyes is twitching. And I've got itchy teeth. You know how you get itchy teeth when you haven't had a drink for a while, but you can smell it. You can almost taste it. And teeth fuzzy, you know. And it's almost there. It's almost there. And Brian is like right out of GQ. He does the whole thing, and it's beautiful, and it's elegant, and I'm really impressed. And then Brian says, okay, it's your turn. I'm like, my turn, it's my turn, my turn, it's my turn. I like my turn. I'm ready for my turn. I twirl it around. I coat the glass. I'm figuring, like, how warm does it need to be, right? So I bring it out. I'm not going to snort it. I'm just maybe going to take a little nose hit off it, and bam, I shoot it just like tequila. It's gone, right? So Brian looks at me. I look at Brian. I don't know who was more surprised. And he says, man, what are you doing? That's like $100 a shot. So I just reverted to the alcoholic anthem. I looked down at my shoes and said, well, I'm sorry. You know, can I have a beer? You know, and he's a generous, magnanimous guy. So he buys me a beer, and I have 3 or 4 beers. I wasn't where I was the night before, but I'm feeling pretty good. And Brian looks at me, he goes, look, you pay attention, we're going to do it again. I'm going, I got it. I can drink like a gentleman, I got this, I got it. He shows me, and I go, and bam, and I shoot it again, right? And now he gives me the look like, he gives me that like, hey man, that ain't right look. You know, that ain't right, you know? And he's never read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, but he knows that I am bodily and mentally different than he is. So he looks at me and goes, man, wow, okay, well, it's about 1 o'clock. It's about 4 o'clock in New York. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then I'm going to head back to the hotel. I'm going to call him and give him the good news. Oh, fine, no problem. You know, he leaves his cognac there. He goes in the bathroom. I'm drinking my beer, minding my own business, and I look over and I see his cognac. Bam! I drink that. You know, I go to the bathroom, I come out, and now Brian is arguing with people about, because this is expensive. He said, who's taking his cognac? He's upset. I remind him I'm a trial attorney by trade. I'm skilled at cross-examination. I start going around the bar. I'm cross-examining people. But Brian is not stupid. Brian is what we call, and some of you may be familiar with this term, an ex-client. Okay? He's leaving, he's shaking his head in disgust, and a normal person would think, I got a problem. I'm working for a large international law firm. I'm going to have some explaining to do. This is bad. My only thought was, great, now I'm going to drink the way I want to drink. I sit down. I get a table. I start drinking beer, shooting tequila, drinking beer, shooting tequila. There's a lot of people that when they drink, they forget to do certain basic functions like eat. That's not my story. I like a light snack, maybe a pizza or a couple cheeseburgers, nothing really heavy. And I don't mean to be gross and disgusting, and I don't, but you are, this is Texas. And I got to tell you, what I do is I drink beer, I shoot tequila, I have something to eat, and I start to fart. I know it's not an impressive skill set, but you got to be there, okay? And the thing is, I'm so amused with myself. I'm just barking them off. I got this whole purple haze thing going on. The people are looking at me in disgust. There's 2 ladies, they're off by the side of the bar, and I'm looking at them, and they're looking at me. And because I have this Kreskin-like ability to read minds, especially when I drink, I'm thinking, oh yeah, they want me. Yeah, there's no, I learned later in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what we call a delusion, okay? But I'm running with it, right? And I'm looking at them, and now I'm making this whole musical crescendo thing. I got this whole purple haze thing going on. And I go to lift my leg to be particularly melodic, and I just miscalculate. Yeah. Now, the bad news is this has happened before. This isn't like this hasn't happened before, right? And it'll almost snap you back to sober when this happens, but you got to, I tell you, if you're thinking about going back out and this happens to you, it's really important. You got to act cool. Act like this is, no big deal. I know it sounded wet, but it's okay. It's all right. I'm cool. And you want to keep that one cheek cocked. You don't want to make contact, right? And then what you do is you slide out on one cheek, right? You slide out on one cheek, you act cool. You go to the bathroom. I'm in the bathroom. I take my jacket off, take my pants off, take my drawers off. I clean myself up. I put my pants back on. I put my jacket back on. I'm out at the sink, rinsing my drawers out, right? Like a guy came in and looked at me just like that, sir. He was like, I'm like, hey, what's your problem? Don't you practice hygiene? Come on, And I get them kind of cleaned up. I wring them out. I go in the bathroom. I take my jacket off, take my pants off. I put my damp drawers on. I put my pants back on. I put my jacket back on. I'm walking out, and a couple things occur to me. First thing I think is, well, that went pretty well. And then the second thing I'm thinking is, these are kind of damp. I'm feeling kind of sexy. Who knows what might happen tonight, right? Again, delusion, right? I'm there. They finally close the bar. They kick me out. I drive home. I park in my driveway, your driveway. I'm an equal opportunity driveway kind of guy. And then I go through the front door. And the front door is not the front door because there's no way I'm getting a key in the keyhole. The front door is a double wide garage door. I'm not parking there. I'm just walking in there. It's the only thing I can walk in. I put that up. I walk in, and right next to the steps that go up to the living room, there's 3 steps, and right next to it, there's a fridge. And inside the fridge, there's beer. I'm an alcoholic. I drink no matter what. I get a beer. I don't care if I've been out 3 days, 3 hours. I get a beer. I drink the beer on the way upstairs. I maybe put it on the nightstand next to the bed, or I put it on the floor. I get into bed next to my lovely wife, and on a good night, 2 or 3 hours later, I get up, I stagger around. Maybe I wind up in the closet. I pee in the trash can or her boots or something like that. And on a bad night, I wet the bed. Yeah. I come to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a vision for you. This is, that's it. And I got to tell you, one of the things that happened to me when I first got to AA, which was on July 27th, 1996, is I wanted to distinguish myself from you. I wanted to be different. I didn't want to have what we all have. And one of the things people were talking a lot, there's a lot of throwing up in California. I don't know about Texas, but everybody was throwing up. Projectile vomiting, different colored vomiting, everybody's vomiting, puke, puke, puke. I never puked. I remember when I finally got a sponsor, I talked to my sponsor about it. I said, I don't know if these people know how to drink. I never puked. I never did any of that. He goes, oh, you're right. You're right. You just crapped your pants with reckless abandon and alarming regularity. Yeah, you're a special brand of alcoholic. You should call New York. They've been waiting for you. That's the kind of love I got in Alcoholics Anonymous. But when I got here, I didn't want to be here. I didn't. The third tradition is the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And there were some elderly women in the meeting that were telling me, honey, just don't leave before the miracle. So I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Give me the miracle. I'm not doing anything, but I'm ready for the miracle. I don't realize that there's a difference between activity and action, okay? And I got to tell you, this is, whether you're an AA or CA or NA or any type of A, all of that is experiential. I'm talking about my experience. You're here to have your experience, not your sponsors, not the person to the left or right, but your experience. I got my experience through the steps. That's the only thing that I can share with you, okay? We are a society of storytellers in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is not something that is foreign to lawyers, because we love to tell stories. We love to tell stories, and that's how we get a lot of our recovery. But I'm not an authority in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't appointed. I wasn't anointed. I'm just the schmuck that Joe Ben called and said, hey, will you come to Austin? And I've been trained to say yes, and I'm glad to be here. But I don't want to be in Alcoholics Anonymous. But what's happened is you're telling my story. The facts are different. The situation is different, but you feel the way I feel. You're talking about this sense of separation. The 12 and 12 calls it anxious apartness. I feel that. But, there are people that are talking about the 12 steps. They're talking about the big book, which is where you find the 12 steps. They're talking about the program, which is the 12 steps, which is found in the big book. They're talking about God or a higher power, if you prefer, which is the point of the exercise. The 12 steps are designed to allow each individual to find, develop, and maintain a conscious contact with a God or higher power, if you prefer, of his or her understanding, so that we can live and move and have our being in the world without alcohol or party favors and chemical enhancements. It's just that simple. And they're talking about that, but I'm not drinking. I'm not an extra credit guy. I don't want to overreact here. I don't want to get over sober. I'm just going to wait for it to happen. And it doesn't happen. And people are talking about being restored to sanity, and I feel like I'm going nuts. And I go on a business trip, and I go back, and I'm in Pittsburgh, and I'm doing depositions getting ready for a trial. And I'm supposed to be there all week, but I get done around Wednesday or Thursday. I'm back in the hotel room at around noon or 1 o'clock. And inside the hotel room, I have an honor bar. An honor bar. I am a newcomer. I have no honor whatsoever, but they've given me this mini fridge. I've got the key, and inside, there's not everything I want and need, but it's a really good start. 2 by 2 by 2, there's gin, there's vodka, there's bourbon, there's scotch, there's a lot of beer, domestics, imports. There was no tequila, which annoyed me, but there's stuff in there, right? And then there's some other crap like soda and water and all that crap. But, but it's in there. And I want to drink. I mean, when the movie Flight came out, I knew Denzel was going to break through that door and get that. It's there. You can smell it. And this thing is talking to me, right? And I'm talking back to it. And people have said, when you go to another city, call the intergroup or the central office and hook up with, I don't do any of that. I have this feeling of separation, this anxious aloneness, which is total BS. It's impossible. But I feel it, and it feels real to me, and until I work the steps, I can't pierce through that illusion. And, I love the big book, and I love the 12 and 12, but when I was new, one of the things that my sponsor did was he had me listen to a series of talks by a guy named Chuck Chamberlain. And in 1975, he gave these talks in Palamesa, and one of his sponsees put it in a book. And inside the book, there's a drawing. And there's only one drawing in the whole book, and the drawing is so simple, it's so basic, it's a circle. And what Chuck does is he puts all the people, plants, and animals of the universe inside the circle of life. And then he puts life, good, God, whatever your concept of a higher power is, inside the circle of life. And to the side of that, he draws a stick man. And the stick man is Chuck, and the stick man is me, and the stick man, I suspect, is you, separate and apart. And what keeps us out of that circle of life is a thin line that Chuck identifies as ego, or conscious separation from God. In the 11th step, we're striving for conscious contact, but I'm new and I've got conscious separation. And I'm trying to distract myself. That honor bar is talking to me, so I start watching television. I'm flipping back and forth between religious television and porno. Religious television and porno. And I didn't say it was a good plan, okay? And I'm getting confused as to who's doing what on what station, okay? But that's a personal problem, okay? And for whatever reason, I don't drink. You can call it the dumb luck of the alcoholic. Norm Alpe used to call it seconds and inches. I would now call it the grace of God, but I would not have referred to it that way that night. I leave, I go downstairs, and I get a car, I go out to the airport, I fly home. I get up the next morning, and during the flight, I've had a lot of time to think. I'm a newcomer, so I've developed a plan. All newcomers have a plan. I'm thinking it's a really good plan. Again, I was in the Army for 13 and a half years. When I got out, I had acquired some things that I'd put in a kit bag. We call it a go bag. I had some weapons, some demolition, and 13 passports. And I'm not going to go Columbine or anything, but I need the passports for my newcomer plan. And I'm thinking this newcomer plan is brilliant. What I'm going to do, I take all this stuff out, and I've since gotten rid of everything. But I take all this stuff out, and I'm going to take my blue tourist passport, my official passport that says my name on it, that the government gave to me as a civilian. Steve Lamb. And I'm going to leave. I'm going to fly to British Columbia. When I get to British Columbia, I'm going to start flipping passports and identities. I'm going to go over to Europe for a month or two. I'm going to come back. I'll be in British Columbia for a while. And then my plan, I got a wife and I got a kid, but I'm thinking my plan is I'm going to fly down to Costa Rica. I've got some former Army associates of mine. They're doing some kind of interesting marketing and distribution down there. That's my newcomer plan, okay? So I lay all this stuff out, and the 13 passports that I should have turned in 1993 when I got out of the Army, they're all current. They have not expired. But my blue tourist passport has expired. So I am beside myself. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of people that are educated here. I considered myself educated. The Army sent me to law school. They sent me to get an LLM. I'm licensed to practice before the Supreme Court of the United States. But this is the fall of 1996, and I can't figure out, this is the pathetic thing, I cannot figure out, I don't have the mental acuity, the synapses are not firing enough to realize it's pre-9/11. I could have flown to British Columbia on my driver's license. I didn't even need my passport. And I'm just out of my mind. So I don't know what to do. I went to a meeting, and there was a guy who became my grand sponsor, and he was talking about sponsorship. I didn't like this guy at all. And it seemed like what he was saying to me, this is not exactly what he said, but what I heard was if you don't have a sponsor, you're going to die. And I felt pretty desperate. And he said, if you have problems with getting a sponsor, come see me after the meeting. And what I'd heard in the meetings was, find someone that has what you want, which to me requires an interview process. Because, I got a complex set of social issues. No, not anybody can sponsor this, really. And so I went up to Jim after the meeting, and I looked at him right in the shoes because I couldn't look at him in the face. And I said, Jim, I heard you talking about sponsorship. I think it's time that I interview for a sponsor. And he just shook his head, and he grabbed me by the shoulder. He said, man, you are pathetic. And he took me outside, and he introduced me to a guy I'd never met before. He says, Michael, Steve, Michael, sponsor, sponsee, go with God. And he walks away laughing. And I'm thinking, well, this ain't funny. It's not even slightly amusing. I don't even know this guy. He's younger than me. I don't know his story. I got a complex set of social issues. Not anybody can sponsor this, right? Now, Michael, on the other hand, he's excited because he's been delivered a new guy. And for those of you that are new, you will rapidly ascertain that we have a vampiric need for new blood. It's, we talk all this spiritual stuff, but the reality is it can be a little bit unseemly. If you're the only newcomer there and there's 5 people, and they're all good friends, they may get hip checked out of the way because they want to talk to you. That's just the way we are. And Michael gets out a piece of paper and a pen, and he writes his name and his address, and he asks me a couple questions I like to ask the people I sponsor. He says, do you have a big book? And I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking this. I'm not saying it, but I'm thinking, yeah, I got a big book. I'm not reading it with you, man. This is wrong. But I heard myself say, yeah, I got a big book. He says, do you have a 12 and 12? And again, I'm thinking this, but I'm not saying it. I'm saying, this is crazy. I don't even know this guy. He's younger than me. By the way, he's got a lazy, wandering eye. It just shifts up and to the right. And won't even focus on you. Really, when we did sexual misconduct inventory, he said, okay, we're going to do your sexual misconduct inventory. And before we do that, I know we've already prayed, but we're going to invite God into the room. And he looked up and to the right. I followed him. I don't know. It's like, so I'm looking at this guy, and he said, yeah, I got a 12 and 12. He says, good, you're going to need them both. Be at my house Monday night at 6:30. And everything in me screamed, no. And I heard myself say, okay. And as soon as I said okay, he turned around and he left because he knew what he was dealing with. He didn't give me an opportunity to reconsider. And that was my first step in Alcoholics Anonymous, because now I'm not only admitting that I'm powerless over alcohol, but my life is unmanageable. I'm asking this person to help me, And he had me take the big book in the 12 and 12, and we read it from stem to stern. And, I started at the beginning, I went to the end. When we got to a prayer, we said the prayer, we got to a step, we worked the step, and he had me read the 12 and 12 to augment it. And I would get there, and the first time I'd gone through the doctor's opinion, and I thought, okay, we're going to talk about it. No. He says, read to me. I'm like, really? Yeah, read to me. And then I would read for a bit, and then he would read for a bit, and he would ask me the meaning of certain words. Well, I'm a lawyer. I know most words. If I don't know it, I'll make it up, right? No. He's got this 1939 dictionary out where we're looking. I thought I knew the meaning of some of this stuff, and I didn't. And I thought, this is just ridiculous. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done. And I did it. And my experience is if you do the work will do you. Attitude is optional. That comes later. I love Alcoholics Anonymous now, but I hated it then. And I was absolutely convinced that it wouldn't work. And if you're new and you feel that way, yeah, we don't really care. I'm not trying to, but we don't really care. Just do the work. And see what happens. We got to the second step, right? Now, okay, I'm going to be restored to sanity, by a power greater than myself. I know what that means. I know we're talking about God. He goes, you have a problem with God? I'm like, I don't know if I have a problem with God, but some of these women are telling me to find God or die, and I'm thinking, I not only don't want to find God, I'm hoping he doesn't find me. I did things in the military that other people do for God and country and patriotism. I did it because I was there, I had power, I had weapons, and I just did it. Now, was it beneficial for the country? Yeah. Did I overdo things? Yeah. I'm the only person that I know that's made amends to a country. I was very concerned about, I read ahead, I know there's a 9th step, I know it's not going to go well, I don't want to do this. And he talks about the concept of God, and we're talking about this. He said, well, do you like music? I said, yeah, I like music. He said, what kind of music do you like? I said, well, I like blues and rock. He goes, well, let's say you were talking to somebody and they liked either classical music or punk rock. Would you try to convince them that they should listen to blues or rock? I said, no, people like what they like. He goes, exactly, that's just like AA. God is like music. Okay, we're just suggesting that you get into the rhythm and harmony of whatever you feel comfortable with. You'll see the word God over 100 times in the big book. You'll see creative intelligence, universal mind, higher power. At one point on page 7, Bill refers to God as my newfound friend, capital F, who doesn't want a friend. And I'm thinking, this guy's trying to trick me, And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, no. He says, look, if in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you've got a religious or spiritual background, we don't tell you to stop that. In fact, we tell you to dive deeper, go further, keep going to church, go to synagogue, do whatever you're doing. Explore. But if you have a problem drinking, you might want to lay the steps over the top of it. And if you have a problem with God, or you don't understand God, or you have some difficulty with some prior religion, why don't you look at the Word as a placeholder for an experience you haven't had yet? And we'll fill in that blank once you've worked the steps. Very logical, but I don't like it. So I don't know. He goes, well, do you think it's possible that you'll be restored to sanity? I said, well, anything's possible. He said, well, that's enough. But now we're on step 3. Now I got to turn my will and my life over to this thing that I don't have any understanding. He said, well, you don't have an understanding because you haven't had an experience. And we went through this whole thing again, and then he took me to page 37 in the 12 and 12. And on page 37 in the 12 and 12, there's something called the acid test. And the acid test is real simple. It goes like this. How is what you're doing working for you? I'm like, well, not very well, Michael. I'm sitting here talking to you, obviously, right? And he goes, well, maybe you should try it our way. And I had nothing. Now, the interesting thing is, for those of you who are new, by the time you get to the 10th step in the 12 and 12 on page 87, there's the same test. Now that you've done 3 through 9 and you're actively in a 10th step, how is what you're doing working for you now? And the answer with every person I've ever worked with is it's working better. Alcoholics Anonymous is practical. If it weren't practical, if it didn't work, we wouldn't do it. So, we do this 3rd step prayer. I don't know that if I meant it or not. I was basically a little bit afraid. And so I tell Michael, I say, okay, well, we've done this 3rd step. Well, how will I know if I've done an appropriate 3rd step? And he says, you're going to do your 3rd step. You're going to turn it over your whole life. But a good general indication is if you start working on your 4th step. Because sponsors are really tricky that way, by the way, just so you know. So he takes me to page 65, because I'm a lawyer, I'm a wordsmith, I'm a pain in the ass, I'm just, I argue about everything. And he says, look, there's all these guides and stuff, and Joe Ben talked about this. He says, I don't want you to do that. I want you to be really, really simple. If you'll notice on page 65, you've got these 3 columns. There's only a few words in each column. You don't need more than 2 or 3 words for each column. You just need to identify the resentment, the person, the institution, or the principle. You need to identify the cause. You need to identify the condition or how it affects you, self-esteem, pocketbook, security, ambition, personal relations, sex relations. And then on page 67, we're going to turn back to our list. There's not a 4th column, but I'm going to ask you to write one. And I want you to list your mistake, fault, and blame. Not your part, your mistake, fault, and blame. And we're looking at selfishness, self-centeredness, self-seeking. We're looking at dishonesty, pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, sloth, the 7 deadly sins that it talks about in the 12 and 12. And then we're talking about fear and the unwilling to accept that another person is a child of God who could be spiritually sick, like it talks on the bottom of 66 and on 67. And he gives me the instructions on the fear inventory, the sexual misconduct inventory, and he turns me loose. He tells me it should take me a couple weeks. It took me about 5 weeks, about 2 or 3 weeks to think about it, and about 2 weeks to do it. Because the book says it's simple but not easy. The simple part is the written part, the black part. The not easy part is me and my ego, which tries to separate me from you and from God. And the latter is not possible, but the former is. And when you do that, it's very painful because it's very difficult to work this program alone. So for the people that haven't gone through this process yet, I just want you to understand how simple the 4th step is. I'll tell you the first person on my inventory. I'm resentful at 2 words, my father. 2nd column, the cause, 2 words, deserted me. When I came from Maine to Las Vegas, we were there for a little while, and when I was 4 or 5 years old, my father was in the Air Force. He left. He went to Vietnam. He didn't come back. He didn't die there. He just stayed there for about 8, 10, maybe 12 years. He did a couple tours in the Air Force. He then joined an outfit called Air America. He stayed there for quite some time. He met a Thai woman, Lien Thong, my stepmom. Apparently married her before he divorced my mom. I have a half-sister, Peck. Never met her, never met Lien Thong. And I've gotten a card or letter occasionally. One time he came through Vegas and he took my brother and I out to get pizza. That's it. But he deserted us. What does it affect? Everything. Pocketbook, security, personal relations, sex relations, self-esteem. Other than that, it's going pretty well. But it's everything, right? What's my mistake, fault, or blame? I don't have a mistake, fault, or blame regarding the cause. How about the condition? I'm 37 years old when I get sober. I'm 38 by the time I'm writing this inventory. I've had this resentment for over 3 decades. What character defect do I have that if God were to remove it, I would no longer have this resentment? Am I selfish, self-seeking, self-centered? I don't think so. How about dishonesty? No. Pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, sloth. I write down anger. I was an angry little SOB for a long time. Now it's just kind of a dull, I just detest the guy. Fear. I have a lot of fear. What does the fear look like? I loved my father. And through that love, at the age of 4 or 5, I gave him a certain amount of power. He abused that power. It hurt me. I can never let that happen again. There has to be a wall of insulation between you and me and you, because it's not safe for me. It's my self-defense mechanism. Does not make for good marital relations, relations with friends or fellows or kids or anything. But it's all I got. And finally, I'm unwilling to accept that my father is a child of God who could be spiritually sick like me. I'm unwilling to forgive him. So I read this to Michael, and I'm getting ready to go on to the next person. I'm going on to Mom, right? And he's like, whoa, I got some questions. I don't understand that this is an interactive process, right? And he says, I want to make sure I understand. You're resentful at your father, and he deserted you, and you've got some residual anger, a lot of fear, and you don't want to forgive your father, right? And I'm like, yeah, and I've read ahead. I know there's a 9th step. It's never going to happen. He goes, look, this is a program of willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness, and all we're doing right now is reading the 5th step. But I got to tell you, we're going to get to that. I do have one more question, though. I'm like, okay, what's the question? He says, well, you remember when we first met, I told you a little bit about myself, and you told me a little bit about yourself. And one of the things that you told me was that you had this plan. You had these passports, and you were going to go to Costa Rica, and you got a wife, and you got a kid, and you were going to take them with you. And you didn't say you were going to desert them, but is what you were planning to do really that much different than what your father actually did? So my first thought was, this is not going the way I thought it was going to go at all. This is not good. And I put my head down and I muttered something like, well, if you look at it that way. And if you haven't gone through this process, that's why we admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, because I need this other human being, in this case my sponsor, to reflect me back to me. To reflect me back to me, because I can't see that. So this is not happy days. I've since learned that can be a spiritual experience. It's called ego deflation at depth. You need to do something with it later. It's called an amends. I was not willing for a long time to do that, but everybody talks about these spiritual experiences like, white light, God talks, bush burns. That doesn't happen that often. Some people have that, but usually what happens is something different and much more subtle. But I finished the inventory. I went home. I got quiet. I reviewed what I'd done. I got to flip the page. I got to do 6 and 7. 6 is a lot about willingness. 7 is a lot about humility. I have very little of either. But I get through it. I now learn that there's a lot more to that than what I first did. My first pass through that was pretty superficial. Then I'm in this 8th step. And my sponsor wants me to make a list of proposed amends. So I do it. I show up the next week, and I show him the list. I got the list. Here's the list. And he looks at it. He says, your father's not on the list. I'm like, your damn Skippy's not on the list. I told you he wasn't going to be on the list. Weren't you paying attention last week? He goes, yeah, I know. Do you think you're any better than your father? I said, no, Michael, and thanks for pointing that out to me. And he said, in Alcoholics Anonymous, a lot like at the end of the meeting last night, Joe Ben had us do the Lord's Prayer. He said there's a particular clause in the prayer. It goes like this: forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Michael says, what do you think that means? I'm like, I think it's a damn trick question. That's what I think it means. It's a spiritual truth. It's an axiom. And then when we're in page 99 in the 12 and 12, when we're talking about the 11-step prayer, what's sometimes referred to as a prayer of St. Francis, it is through forgiving that we are forgiven. Well, yeah, I agree with that. I got it. I know he's no better than me. Okay, are you willing to make amends? No. He says, well, the 8th step is about willingness. Are you willing to pray for the willingness? I said, yeah. He says, okay, you pray, I'll pray, we'll both pray. Fine. I start making amends. I start paying back the money. I'm making amends in the law firm. I'm doing, because I did all kinds of shenanigans there. That's actually pretty easy, because they knew all about it, even when I was blacked out, they kept a record of stuff that I did. It was amazing. And I make amends to the wife. I'm back in the big bed. I don't quite have the crossover privileges that I think I deserve, but things are going better, right? And now I'm doing an active 10 step. I'm looking at this inventory. I'm talking to Michael about it. If I need to make amends, I'm making amends promptly, which, by the way, when I was new, was about 3 or 4 weeks. That time frame compresses as you get more time. I'm doing 11 step. I'm praying and meditating every morning. I'm trying to get in conscious contact with this thing that I don't really understand. I'm having some moments sometimes. Now I'm trying to practice the principles in all my affairs in the 12 step, and I'm ready for sponsorship. I'm ready to carry the message, and people start asking me to sponsor them. I'm taking guys through the steps. We're going through the steps. They're finding a God of their understanding. I'm sober. Everything's going well, but I'm not making amends to my father. This goes on for years. For years. finally, after, 5, 6, 7 years, I talked to my sponsor a lot. I'm very close to him. He's been my sponsor since the day I got him as a sponsor, and it's been over 20 years now, over 21 years now, actually. And I told him, I said, hey, Michael, I'm going to go do some depositions up in Anchorage in a couple weeks. And he just stopped everything. He got all lit up. He goes, man, that's great. You'll make amends to your father. And I forgot that I had told him that my father was living in Wasilla, which is about 30 miles outside of Anchorage. So now I'm trying to wave him off. I'm trying to wave him off. So, no, you're connecting two unrelated dots. No, I'm just going to go do deposition. No. He says, no, you're praying. I'm praying. God's talking. Can't you hear him? I'm like, no, actually, I can't hear him at all. I'm not getting that message. She goes, no, you're getting quiet every morning. You do this every morning. I want you to get quiet. I want you to really talk to God about this. Oh, God. So I do this. And it's the answer. So I go back to Michael. I say, okay, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to call him. What do I say and how do I make amends? He looks at me, he goes, I don't know. I'm not going up there. Talk to God. I'm like, oh, geez. I used to call my sponsor the Mystic Muffin, the Cosmic Cupcake. I mean, he just drove me crazy. Every time I'd ask him a question, he always referred to God. I thought he didn't know squat. I really did. I thought he didn't know anything. But now I realize it is the answer to everything because he can't be my God. He can't be my higher power. At 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I got to connect with something. So I call my father. He says he'll meet me. I'm a little nervous, but I've made a commitment. I fly up to Anchorage. I go through the terminal. I see him in the terminal, and he's a lot shorter and older than I remember. And he's kind of shuffling towards me. He's moving his hands, but he's awkward. He's uncomfortable. I, on the other hand, am striding towards him with purpose. I don't know what I'm going to do, but when I got up to him, I did one of the things I just detested when I first got to AA. I hated all the huggy, feely, hug, kiss, kiss, In AA in California, they hold hands, and they rock their hands back and forth, and they keep going, keep coming back. It works if you work it. And the first time I heard that, I thought, I have died and gone to Huckleberry Hell. This is unconscionable. I don't like all this invasion of personal space. And I got out to my father, and without thinking, I just like, God, I don't know what to do. And I just grabbed my father, and I hugged him. And he buried his head right here on my shoulder, and he cried. And I cried, and it lasted for about 5 minutes, and forgiveness occurred. And all I had to do was show up and get out of the way. Show up and get out of the way. And the interesting thing about the 11th step is, we pray for guidance and direction. And, occasionally I'm sure that there's burning bushes, and sometimes there's an AA member that says, God talked to me and said, this is my son or my daughter in whom I'm well pleased. That hasn't happened to me. I'm ready, but it hasn't happened to me. What happens is, usually I'm at a meeting and somebody I don't particularly care for is sharing about something that has nothing to do with my specific problem. And if I pay attention, the answer is embedded in what they're saying. And that's why we talk about having a spiritual awakening. And then the kicker is to stay awake, to stay focused. And particularly for lawyers, that's difficult because we are trained by nature to think back and think ahead and think now at the same time. But in spiritual work, all there is right here, right now. And things got better with my wife. Remarkably, I was surprised. Who knew that there was a relationship issue there? And I've seen my father's come down. I've been up to see him. And do we have this great, father-son relationship? No, we don't. But I don't have this ball of bile in my stomach every time I think about him. We're okay. We're healed. He did the best he could at the time. It's all right. It's okay. One of the other significant amends that I made was to my daughter, Ashley. My daughter was born with cerebral palsy and a seizure disorder. Can't walk, can't talk, in a wheelchair. One of the many things that I'm not proud of, but it's true, is I resented her before I got sober, and I resented her after I got sober. And I've done a lot of inventory on this, and I think part of it was my misguided notion that I had to take care of her rather than I got to take care of her. I had no concept of love before I got here. I had no connection between love and service. I didn't understand that. You taught me that by having me take a mop and clean up after my home group. And I remember saying, yeah, I'm a lawyer. And they said, yeah, lawyers look good with mops. And I'm like, God, no. And I remember mopping that. And the way we had it was there's like half the room. I had half the room, and, Jerry's got the other half. And about 3 months later, Jerry's on my half of the room. I'm like, hey, man, I'm mopping here. This is my side of the room. Yeah, you know what, I mean, it's just weird how you learn these things through these simple things in Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know, I got to the point where I knew that the way I felt about my daughter was not right. I mean, that's not, a father's not supposed to feel that way about a daughter. I'm doing this inventory, I'm praying and meditating, I make amends to my daughter. She's at this 24-hour care facility down in San Diego at the time, and she needs to be there because she has, I don't know, 50, 60 tonic-clonic seizures a day. They're just kind of spasmodic seizures. But once every few weeks or few months, she has a grand mal seizure. Her heart stops, her breathing stops. They need to paddle her. They need to bring her back. And I'm going down there every weekend, and we got this kind of step-up van. We could put the wheelchair in, and I'd put a balloon around her wheelchair, and I'd brush her hair, and the wind would blow through her hair, and she'd laugh and giggle, and a father was restored to a daughter, and a daughter to a father, and that was AA. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And then the first guy, and I thought that was good. That was good. The first guy I sponsor is a guy named Stephen. Stephen has a son, Evan. Evan has cerebral palsy with a seizure disorder. Stephen resents him the same way I resented Ashley. We work these steps, this set of spiritual exercises that are designed to allow him to find and develop a God and maintain a God of his own understanding. And he found that God, and a father was restored to a son, and a son to a father, and that's Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, is that a coincidence? I've met many people with special needs kids, but the very first person that asked me to sponsor him has a special needs kid. One of the things that's really unique about Alcoholics Anonymous is whatever your problem is, whatever your bias is, whatever your prejudice is, it'll walk across the room and ask you for help. One of my favorite stories, we were talking about Bill C. And Bill C's in my home group, and he was talking in North Hollywood or Hollywood, it's a gay meeting, right? And he gave a great talk, and there was a guy that was obviously gay, came up to him afterwards and said, you know, I heard your talk, I really liked your talk, and I thought you might be able to help me. Could you sponsor me? And Bill looked at him and said, well, I could do that, but wouldn't you be more comfortable with a gay sponsor? And the guy looked at him right in the face. He said, no, I got the gay thing down. I'm pretty good with the gay thing. You know? So, I do gay really well. Now, this alcohol thing, it's kicking my ass, you know? And you're like, of course. You know, the first guy that I sponsored, Stephen, he was homophobic. The first guy that asked him to sponsor him, gay. You know, it's a remarkable program. You know, so we go through this process, and you know, at one point in time in 2004, we got a call, you know, I got to go down, and my daughter's sick, and she's in the hospital. She's in ICU. And I brush her hair, and I kiss her, and I tell her it's going to be okay. And that was a lie. The doctor called us over and said, she's not going to make it out. I'm like, what are you talking about? And what the doctor said is, look, your daughter's 19, but she's been on this anti-seizure medication, and her kidneys, her liver, she's having renal failure, which I should be aware of because a lot of us with all the drugs we've used, we have these type of similar problems. I mean, she's 19, but internally she's like 90, and she's not going to make it. And I'm talking to God all the time, and I'm not having a good conversation the next morning. I'm pissed off. And I'm like, God, how could you do this to me? I know I wasn't a good dad, but I'm a good dad now. How could you take my daughter from me? Because I couldn't see it for what it was. And my sponsor and his sponsor, Scott Redmond, God bless them both, they didn't tell me what to do. They just said, look, just keep praying and meditating, you'll get the answer. And I did this, and in a few days, what happened to me was I realized I was being selfish and self-centered. My daughter was fine. She was ready to go. She was in a lot of pain. And she couldn't talk, but she could express herself with her eyes. And my job was to be her father in this world and the next. And I was able to do that and be there for her. You know, and I realize now, and this is just for me, I now believe that we're just not a bag of bones and sinew and muscle and blood and tissue. There's something else. There's an essence or a being. The religious call it the golden cord, the silver thread, that which binds me to you and you to me and us to God. Scott called it the connective tissue of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's what we pass on. And you heard tonight some of these people that have passed on, that this award, this MAC award was given to. They're not gone. They're not physically here, but they have embedded their presence, their essence in many of you. And your job is to pass that on to the new people. That's what we talk about. And eventually Evan passed away, and we were there for him. You know, and if you're in Alcoholics Anonymous and you stay sober, people are going to die. You know, it's what happens. And I got to tell you, I really love AA. And just so you have an understanding, though, of, we talk about all this spiritual stuff, and I'm talking about spirituality today, but I want you to understand kind of the nature. I'll tell maybe a couple stories and then quick on who you're dealing with tonight. The first is, a little over 2 years ago, again, I'm glad to be here, I'm glad to be anywhere. A little over 2 years ago, on May 21st of 2016, I got shot. I was up in Badger, California, which is next to Sequoia National Park. We'd had breakfast, I was sitting on my bed, and I swear to God I was minding my own business. I'm going to stick to that story, that's my story. I was minding my own business. I'm sitting on the bed, and upstairs from me there's a gentleman who decided to clear his Glock 9mm weapon. And he missed a very critical step. And he discharged a round, and it went through the bed that he was on, which was the floor that he was standing on, and it's a ceiling above me. And it went through the ceiling, and it entered right above my heart, right here, and it embedded in my sternum, right underneath my chest bone. It'll get your attention, I'll tell you. Now, I've been shot before, because like I said, I was in the Army for a while, but not like this, not in the chest. And I immediately checked for an exit wound. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I put my finger in the entry wound to see if I could find the end of the round, and I couldn't. It was really deep in there. It's still in there, by the way. I have the x-ray if you're curious. I'll show it to you. And but I didn't have a sucking chest wound. It obviously didn't hit an artery or my heart, or I wouldn't be talking here tonight. And so, but I will tell you, we talk about spiritual stuff. The first word out of my mouth, and it wasn't a yell, it was more like a yelp. I won't repeat it, but it's kind of a shortened version of fire truck. And I yelled it pretty loud, and the gentleman from upstairs, he comes running downstairs. He goes, "Man, what happened?" I'm like, "You shot me. That's what happened, right?" And now he's all excited. He's concerned. And I got to tell you, this happened when I was almost 20 years sober. I was not upset with him. I don't even know if I had to forgive him. I knew he was in a lot of pain, and he was concerned about me, and I was more concerned about him than I was about me. Now, that makes no sense. And that is not the guy that went over to Beirut in 1983 or, before he came into AA. That's not my normal state. I went into the bathroom, I got a towel, I stopped the bleeding, and I told him, I said, "You got to take me down to the hospital." He goes, "Okay." So he's driving down to the hospital. The hospital is in Visalia, which is normally about an hour away. We got there in 35 minutes. I mean, he's doing like a speed racer thing. I looked over at him, I said, "Man, I really don't want to survive this gunshot wound to die in a car wreck. So if you could just amp it back a little bit, I would appreciate it." We get there, we get to the emergency room, I walk in, and they always ask you, "Can we help you?" And I got this bloody towel over my chest. I said, "Yeah." So, "Well, what's your problem?" I said, "Well, I've been shot." Now, when you tell them you've been shot, you go right to the head of the line. There's all kinds of people. They got broken bones and sniffles. Forget those guys. They come out, they get the gurney, they put me on the gurney, they got 14, 15 people working on me. They take me in, they do an x-ray, they find the round. They realize it's not moving. There's a cardiologist there, he's looking at it. And he's like, "Man, that's wild. Now I'm the freak show." Because, no, really, because apparently I'm not going to die, and they're just looking at it, they're shaking their head. And they'd done an EKG, and the cardiologist said, "Well, look, we're going to observe you for a couple days, and we're going to let you go. But you need to see your cardiologist when you go down to the South Bay, down by L.A., and because you've got this thing, this atrial flutter. It's kind of like atrial fibrillation. It's your heart's just kind of quivering, which is not that surprising after you've been shot." And so I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And in a couple days, I leave. I go down, and I go to my cardiologist, Dr. Carlson. And he does an EKG, and he says, "Yeah, you've got this atrial flutter." He goes, "But look, we've got this procedure." And you've seen in the movies how they paddle guys and they shock them. Well, we're not grisly or arcane like that. I mean, that's kind of barbaric. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to tape these pads to you with electrodes. And then we're going to hit you with a high voltage of electricity. That will stop your heart. We will keep your heart stopped for, 5, 7, maybe 10 seconds. And then we'll hit you with another shock. And then your heart will start again, and hopefully it'll get in rhythm. So I'm not that quick on the uptick, but I'm like, "Okay, Doc, you're going to kill me." He says, "No, we don't look at that way, Mr. Lamb. And it's a controlled environment. You'll be in the hospital. I will be there. I'll be with you. I'll be by your side all the time. I'll be the guy who's administering the electricity. And by the way, before the procedure occurs, there will be an anesthesiologist, and he will come in and he will give something to you that will make you comfortable." So I go from "you're going to kill me" to "I'm going to get comfortable." Now, it's not that I haven't been comfortable in Alcoholics Anonymous before, but I haven't been that kind of comfortable in over 20 years, right? This is a free pass. My sponsor's going to be okay with it. I'm thinking, great, man. Set it up, Doc. Let's do it. Let's schedule this thing, right? So I show up in a couple weeks. I got the hospital gown on. They tape the pads on me. They give me an IV. And Dr. Carlson's right there, and the anesthesiologist comes in, and he's got, the syringe comfortable. And I'm watching him all the way across the room, right? And he gets up to me and he says a couple nice things and he injects the syringe into the IV. And next thing I know, I'm talking to Dr. Carlson. And Dr. Carlson says, how you feeling? I'm like, good, I'm ready. Let's get comfortable. He goes, no, we've already done the procedure. It went pretty well. I'm like, no, that ain't right. You told me I was going to get comfortable. I'm going to, and I'll tell you, that's alcoholism. Only an alcoholic is going to argue about the value and the merit of the anesthetics, right? That's... And the crazy thing about this story, though, is when I got shot, I was on an AA retreat. I was leading the retreat. I had given a talk the night before on unity, which I thought was a pretty compelling talk, but apparently I didn't keep one in the bag. And that night that I was shot, I was supposed to give a talk on acceptance and forgiveness. You can't make this up. This is just bizarre. Now, the best part about it, though, is the guy that shot me, I sponsor him. Yeah. You really like that, don't you? Yeah, I know. It's like such a crowd pleaser with Al-Anon. Say just like, yes, your sponsee shot you. Yes. I love you too, Corey. God. I sponsored him then and I sponsor him now because the reality is he screwed up. Everybody that I know in Alcoholics Anonymous screwed up sober, screwed up drunk. We screw up. This is a pretty big one. And by the way, if you're new, I not only don't recommend it, but that's not the thing you want to do. But the point is, we make mistakes. And then the last thing I want to tell you is that I want to give you an idea of what my mind works like. My biggest resentment against my wife, and it's going to sound trivial and ridiculous because it is, was I had a couple years sober, and she would take the trash and recycling and she'd put it on the stoop. I know what that means. Yeah, because I got this Kreskin-like ability to read minds. And I know that means that I'm not restored to full husband status. Despite all the good work that I've done in Alcoholics Anonymous, she's not really getting it. So I'm pissed, right? And I take the trash recycling and I put it in the bins, but I'm writing inventory and I'm pissed. And I read the inventory to Michael, and first thing Michael asked me is, well, have you talked to her about it? I'm like, no, I haven't talked to her about it. No. So I've been married 34 years now, and by then I'd been married like 12, 13 years, and I'm like, Michael, I know, you find this hard to understand, but, I know what my wife's thinking before she's thinking it. And he goes, really? Do tell. That's interesting. We call that mind reading. It's a pretty significant character defect, but if you're not willing to ask God to remove that, then I suggest that you pray and meditate and ask that God remove this resentment, because it's pretty bad. So I'm doing the trash recycling, I'm praying and meditating, and it takes months, and after a few months, what comes to me is patience, tolerance, love, and understanding. We talk about it all the time in the meetings, it's in the book all over the place, but it takes me a while to hear it. It's just like you could be talking to a newcomer and saying, I think you should make amends. And they're not doing it. And then they go to a meeting and, some chucklehead like Joe Ben gets up and talks about amends, and you go to coffee with him afterwards, and he says, hey, I heard Joe Ben. I think I'll make amends. So I pray for patience, tolerance, love, and understanding, and I got it. I got the trash recycling. I'm a man of God. I'm sponsoring guys. And by the way, I'm telling all the guys what great work I've done on this inventory, by the way, because I had a little issue with spiritual pride. This goes on for about, I don't know, not that long, maybe 10 years. And we get a dog, Zoe. Zoe's a golden retriever. She poops. I take her out in the morning. She poops. I put it in a bag. I throw it in the trash. Well, on nights that I go to a meeting, which is pretty frequently, she'll go out in the backyard and she'll poop in the backyard. My wife will pick it up, but does she put it in the trash? No. She puts it with the trash and recycling on the stoop. So, I've dealt with the trash and recycling. But now I got dog crap. I got dog crap, Michael. I know what that means. I got dog crap. And I'm reading, I read him the inventory. He says, well, have you talked to her about it? I said, no, I haven't talked to her about it. No. I said, all right, get the same direction, pray and meditate. I pray and meditate. A couple weeks, patience, tolerance, love, and understanding. I got patience, tolerance, love, and understanding. I got it. I got the trash, recycling, and poop. I'm doing this. And by the way, I tell all the guys, what great work I've done. Because, I'm humble. And God, it's so pathetic, this spiritual pride. The thing about spiritual pride that's interesting is when you've got it, everyone else sees it, but you're not aware of it. It's the most insidious form of pride. And this goes on for a number of years, and then a few years ago, I go out the front door instead of the side door. And I don't get the trash, recycling, and poop, and I feel bad. And I'm at work, and it's Monday night. My home group is the Hermosa Beach Men's Stag. I'm going to go to my home group, and I got to have dinner before, so I got the wife and the kids, and I got to make amends to the wife. So I tell my wife's name is Lynn. I go, hey, Lynn, I didn't. You probably noticed I didn't get the trash, recycling, and poop this morning. I know that's my job. I apologize. I'll be better next time. She looks, what are you talking about? I'm like, baby, the trash, recycling, and poop. I've been for over a decade, and it's my job, and I didn't do it this morning, and I apologize. I'll be better. She goes, what? So I've been taught to pause when agitated. I slow it down, and I talk to her like a 3-year-old, which, by the way, they really love that, and so she looks at me. She has that look in her eyes like, you are so stupid. And she says to me, Steve, we've got possums and raccoons and all kinds of weird critters out in the back there where the trash recycling is. And we've even had coyotes coming down from PV, and that's Palos Verdes, and they've taken a couple small dogs and cats. So I don't like to go there at night. I don't like to, it just makes me nervous. So I put that stuff on the stoop there. I figure I'll get it in the morning, or the girls will get it, or you'll get it. But I don't leave it there for you. So this resentment that I think I've worked through has no basis whatsoever, in fact. Right? So I look at my lovely wife, and I just go, I love you, babe. I got to go. Because I am not going to have this conversation with her, right? So I go to my home group because, they'll have sympathy, right? They'll have empathy, right? This is Alcoholics Anonymous. Let us love you till you can love yourself. I go to my sponsor. I go to Bill. I go to these guys, and they think it's hilarious. They take me around, tell all the newcomers, right? And I'm like, and my sponsor, Michael, goes, Lamb, that's why we call it a delusion. That's why we call it a delusion. And what he had told me years ago is, a lot of times in Alcoholics Anonymous, guys will get up here and they'll talk about denial, but you won't find denial in the first 164 pages of the big book. It's not in the first part, the 12 and 12. There's a story in the 4th edition called Crossing the River of Denial, but denial is really a treatment center or a rehab term, and what it means is, I know the truth, but I don't like the truth, and I'm trying to convince you of the lie. Delusion is, I didn't get the memo. You all know what's true. I don't know that it's false, and I'm running with it, and it's much more dangerous and much more insidious. And I remember looked at him, and Michael said to me, well, but there's good news and bad news. I'm like, what's the bad news? And he said, well, the bad news is it never ends. It never ends. I said, well, what's the good news? He said, well, the good news is it never ends. And this is Alcoholics Anonymous. There's not only always something to do, but there's somebody to do it with. So if you're new and you're in your first year, I really hope that you find a sponsor and somebody that you can share with, because this is a program that has basically saved my life and the lives of thousands and hundreds of thousands of millions of others. And the real beauty of it is, the whole point of it is so that you can turn around and be of service to the next person. And if you're new, that's completely illogical. And I wish I could tell you that it makes sense. But I've never seen anybody come into an AA meeting and look up on the wall and see the 12 steps and go, oh, I've been waiting my whole life for this. Oh, God. Oh. Joe Ben, could you please take me through the steps? No, we don't do that. We're like, there's got to be a door number 2 or a door number 3, The answer is so simple, it's so easy, and it's right in front of us. And we resist, And that's why in the 12 and 12 it talks about rebellion dogs our every step. But if you're in that position, there's somebody that can be there with you the whole time and that can help you get back on the path. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Steve. We really appreciate your being here and sharing your story with us. I got a lot out of that. I don't know about you, but we have a small token of our appreciation here.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
Go ahead. No big deal.